derailed by injury.
Yeah.
And he's still so young, so it's hard to get like a good idea of him. But now entering the last year of his rookie deal, can you kind of tell us where you're at with him now that a decision is coming soon?
I mean, you know what's interesting about that is if you were to probably go through the first part of the season and say, okay, what are the storylines of the first 30 games of the season? Poku 100% probably would have been one of the top 3, 4, just based on my anecdotal sense of things. And then you get to the end of the year and so many other things have happened that you kind of forget the progress that this guy's that progress that he made. And that's not a criticism of anybody. It's just we're getting lathered with so much information, all the time that you kind of things don't stick quite as much. Had a great year. He put himself in position through the summertime, and he was starting for us the first night. And that was after, I don't know how I would say he was doing at that point, because it's a different process with those types of guys, in my opinion. I think we're going to need a lot of time. Like I would have told you, like in 4 years we might know, but we got to put him in all these situations. He's responded very well. I think I said that in the past. Like he's responded well to a lot of circumstances. G League assignments. He always came back better. He had a couple injury things. He's bounced back from things. His maturity is significantly different. I think he's more comfortable. His defense was on a different plane than we had seen the last time when he started. When he came in here, he was protecting the rim a little bit for us. So very happy for him. I think he'll play national team. So which I think, to Cliff's point, I think that's a good thing for him. And we'll see where it is. But he's made his progress is interesting because within the seasons he's always had some choppy area because he's so young. But by the end of the season, you could always say he's gotten better. Even with a very short amount of time that he played this year, it's very clear he's a better player now than he was when he started the season. So I'm happy with him, and he's stuck with it. That's not easy to do.
Sam, you taught us no shortcuts. Don't rush the process. Don't be beholden to a clock. But you also have 4 first-round draft picks next summer, which is in a way a ticking clock. Does the improvement and development and blossoming of this team change your outlook in any way on what you might do just in the next calendar year as it refers to those 4?
Yeah.
If you hadn't had some of the development of Santa Clara or Joe or whoever, your team might not be as far along. But they did; those things did happen. You are better than we thought. Maybe whether you thought or not. Does that change what you might do in the near future with decision making?
Yeah. Fair question. I think the first thing I would say is that's a long time away. So that's obviously we got to get through this draft, get to the next draft, and then we don't even know if all those picks will convey. But I certainly would probably want to know where they would be, right? So Houston, Utah, Clippers. Ours, yeah. Sorry. I know there's 4. You said there was 4, so I trusted you. There's 4. And so I'd like to know a little more about like where those potentially could be. This is the way I look at I anticipated that someone would ask this question. Not the exact one you asked, Barry, but what do you do with the draft picks? Because someone asks that every year. The way I would look at this is, if you think one day you want to buy a house, okay, but you don't know where it's going to be, but you want to buy a house, you don't go out and buy the paint for it now. You'd rather wait to see, where's the house? How much paint do I need? What color? I'm going to have blue paint. I'm going to buy 10 cans. We need to know what the house looks like before we start thinking about like the cosmetics, in my opinion. We might know a little more after another 82 games, and if we're fortunate enough to get to the postseason, we'll know more information. We'll also know more about those potential draft picks. But I think we have to, for me, I'd like to see the team. I'd like to think that we won't have to look outside of the team to get a little better than we are now. But this is, as I said before, a lot has been accomplished in a short amount of time. To be where we are from where we started after 2 drafts, I'm very pleased with the players and the coaches, but we still are under 500. And we're going to be one of the youngest teams in the league. And we have a lot more work to do internally. And the more we do, the more understanding we'll have as to what potentially we might want to do to complement. But we are introducing a new player next year in Chet. And so I think we have to be willing to observe that and not predict, oh, this is exactly what we need to do. Having those draft picks, even if on paper it says, well, we don't have enough spots for them, that's a problem everybody would like to have. Like that's like saying I'm walking into a store and saying I have too much money. I don't. What's the problem? I have a problem here. Like no. So I would say we'll definitely figure that out. If the players are as good as you know you're saying, that's even better. But I'd still like to know what we're adding. And I use the Jeff Green example all the time, which is we had a nice team, a good team. We were a 50-win team on our way to another 50. But we could tell that we struggled in that era of basketball. Yeah, it's funny because if you took that team and put it now, you know where I'm going with that. People would be saying different things about it. They wouldn't be saying, you're too small. They'd be saying, this is the really good modern team. But we played certain teams, and that team, as good as it was as a 50-win level team, it just had limitations against certain teams. We needed some adjustments and modifications. But they were very clear what it was that we needed because we had seen it enough. We had a game of our own that you could identify with. And, like, our competency showed our flaws. I'd like to be at a position where I could say that. I think we've got a lot of things we need to work on. I think it's hard to say that there's one that we could go out and just say, oh, this is going to fix this. And then there's also just the organic nature of, like I said before, having to go through things and gain experiences to understand what we're even trying to accomplish. So I know there's a lot there. The other last thing I'd say on that is we've done a lot of, so we've built teams from the bottom. We've had to build a team from the middle. I think that was probably the hardest thing was when we lost Kevin and we were still, that's a hard spot to try to move the net rating up from. And, we've also had to sustain teams. We've traded away draft picks, quite a few. We've still owe some to Atlanta. We've traded 4 draft picks. We've hit the buyout market. I think Derek Fisher was one of the best buyout market ads that we've seen in a long time. He stayed with us for a couple years. We've used extend and trade. We've softly transitioned a lot of different things through the last 15 years. I'm confident that we'll know how to transition this particular dynamic. But one of the things that I've learned over the years through experiences, you just can't map it out so strictly that you think you'll be able to anticipate what you're going to need. You kind of have to let that reveal itself. Otherwise, you're taking a pretty big risk because A, you're giving things up in advance, but B, you could also be compromising the growth or development of somebody else or stifle what you have already. And so it's very delicate. I just think it's a super delicate analysis.
When you have future draft picks and some of them have restrictions on them.
Yeah.
You talk about you'd like to know what they are before you trade for them.
Not totally, but a
Right,
better
but-
picture.
right.
Yeah.
I would assume the team you're going to trade with would like to know that too. But in some ways, how do you balance the fact that right now, first round draft pick from Houston, even with the top 4 protection, that gets people interested.
I think it's less that. I think it's less the know where they are, because we'll play risk. I think we've shown that. Like, one thing we're not is scared. So that is not the problem. It's more, what do we know about the team, and being able to say, hey, this is what we do need. We know enough about the team, but if we were to do that at the beginning of the year, we wouldn't know about Isaiah Joe. We wouldn't know about Jay Will. J Dub may not be in the position he's in right now. So I think we have to be careful about premeditating some of that. That's just my opinion. Now, does that mean that we would never consider? No, of course not. We consider everything. We look at everything. We're always considering those things and talking about those things. But I think for the most part, it's hard to predict the needs, because once you use it, it's very hard to go back to that. And also, I think there's you could also be compromising what you have. The other big aspect of that, and I can't go into great detail, is a new CBA. So the value of those assets potentially, especially if the cost of our team goes up, those assets are extremely valuable because they're cost controlled and they're retainable. So it's also a bit of an economic equation where you'd like to see, like, I remember my first couple of years here, we were in a similar situation and everybody wanted us to give the max to David Lee or Ben Gordon. And we decided not to do that, and we still had a hard time keeping the team together financially. But if we had done that, it'd have been, forget it. So it would have been, because nobody would have been able to predict the development of some of the guys we had. It just took off for us. And then, just the way that that CBA got written, unfortunately for the Thunder, it wasn't good. This way going forward, I think we have to see, obviously, if we have those types of economic crunches, but if we do, having the additional draft capital will be important to fielding a team. I think that's going to be important to consider too.
That said, are there any circumstances that could lead you guys to use cap space this summer?
Well, I mean, again, I want to be careful because of the CBA conversation. Got to let that happen. We're always we look at everything. You know what I mean? We'll look at everything, but we're not. We've generally been pretty conservative with how we've approached that and looked at ways to use it that may not be as orthodox. So, and I think that's for us, like, that's probably the way that we always look through that, the cap space through that kind of a lens, because you want to get maximum value out of whatever assets you're deploying, and space is an asset. So how do you maximize the value of that asset? Well, it might be different in certain situations than others, but we're not gonna. There's no like hard and fast. Like I said before, I was saying to Barry, we've transitioned. We've been in a lot of situations. Like just because we're in this particular situation now and the way that we're managing, doesn't mean that we've only done it this way. I think we've done it a lot of different ways. It's just been over a long period of time. Cap space for us has always been looked at through how do we get the most value out of it. It's not always by just like signing, X player. But we'll see. Eventually that might be the case. I would never shut off anything. I think that would be unwise.
How much do you weigh of your current and most recent product when making draft decisions, especially as it seems like a core is starting to materialize?
You mean like your current team? Yeah. It all factors in. I hate to be vague about these things because like it's not intentional, but it's just for me. it's a combination of left and right brain all the time. And I think you got to be able to operate both ways. I think the key is, can you go left and right brain? But more importantly, do you know when to deploy each side? But I think if you're operating in one space with one limit, like one way, I think you're shut off. And the nuances of bringing all that stuff together, the current team, the player that you'd be adding, the personal component, the analytical component, the strategic component, all that stuff factors in. That's what I like about it. You know what I mean? But the processes are really just means to identify the best options, and then you have to pick one. And everything goes through that kind of process, but it's not just like a concrete process, and it's not just a subjective process. I think you got to be able to play in both of those worlds to come out with good judgment. Good judgment, I don't think, is a result of expertise. I think it's like experience and the ability to toggle between soft and hard skills. And that's what you're touching on is really the nuance of that in what we do. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of everything.
And at least from the outside perspective, Lindy went from kind of a feel-good story as the local guy who, signs with the local team, and now he's playing, important minutes in a playing game. He's got a team option, I think, for next year. Just what have you thought of his path, and also maybe moving forward?
I mean, I always say, like, those are the paths that we like. We're not a yellow brick road, program, and he's done a great job. I mean, I remember him showing up for open gym and like had a hard time getting in the games, so he's just done a great job. He's a good player, and I think he's figured out how to play well here. He's figured that out, and he's not totally reliant on other players to help him, but he's figured out how to rely on the system to give him opportunities, which is a skill, in my opinion. But it shows you there's guys everywhere that can play. Like, opportunities is king in the NBA, really is.
When it comes to players, you'll hear different observations, you'll hear different discourse from draft people, scouts, media members in this room, and others about what a Thunder guy is, and we try to make inferences just based off like common parallel lines. But I just want to know, from your perspective, how would you describe what a Thunder guy is as a basketball player?
It's a hard question for me, because I can't. I'd love to answer it, but I don't think I'm not very concise in these moments anyway. This could be a bad one. This could really waste time. So I don't know. The other thing about it is I hate talking like that, because it comes across like so like righteous and like, well, it's a certain type of guy. Like, good person, right? Same values. Hardworking, reliable, open-minded. Can kind of get over themselves and see how they can fit with the team. Give themselves up a little bit, but also still an individual. Because I do think you need these personalities that are different, and we've had some personalities that have been different. I do think you got to embrace the guys and their idiosyncrasies and their differences, but you should never shy away from that, I don't think. But you want those things, and then I think resilience are important. That's another important thing. But those guys just aren't walking around everywhere. They're hard to find, and you don't need all of them either. Sometimes if you have someone that has that, and another guy on the team that doesn't, but they have something the other guy doesn't have, that's what a team is. A team is a group of people working together to solve that day's adversity. And you need a lot of different people to do that.
Are there any new updates on a new arena since the last time you spoke to us?
The answer to that is no. That's really Mayor Holt thing. So I'd really defer to him. I know he's talked about it a little bit publicly, but I don't want to. I don't want to like step out of my lane on that. It's really his thing, you know. And I commend him because he's thinking forward about the future of the city, and I think that's what's driving his focus on that. But I don't want to talk about that without he's the one that needs to speak about it, I think.
Sam, Auburn's Jalen Williams declared for draft. Is there any way we can get that?
Well, we have all these draft picks next year in case you heard. I definitely can't touch that because of the rules. But I understand where you're going with that, and it's duly noted.
Have you found any advantages to having two guys with the same name? Were there any
Yeah,
situations where other teams were confused?
Oh, that part? No. But one thing that is absolutely critical to teams, and especially in the NBA, is humor. You know, I think you got to have some humor, and that has added a fair amount. Now, at a certain point, it starts to get a little tiresome, I think, for them, you know. But it's definitely brought some humor, and I think the way you deal with difficult circumstances and stuff like that, at some point you got to laugh about them. And those guys, I mean, Jay Will walks around with a smile. I mean, he's plastered on. He's smiling all the time. So, you know, those two guys can have a good time with it. But it's mostly everybody else, you know. But it's fun. It's unique. We haven't had that before.
Thoughts on Lou Dort's season? He obviously struggled finishing at the rim and other aspects of his game, but then you get down to these last 10 games, like you said, you just really see his imprint.
Yeah, I mean he's such an important guy for us. The thing I'm impressed with Lou about is I think he realizes his function. Like I was saying earlier, I think he realizes how important his physical presence is, his defense, his courage. You know, I will say, and you've never really heard me say this before about individual awards or anything like that, because I don't think they're. I just hard because we're biased. You know what I mean? I think all our guys should win all the awards, right? But I mean, there's some people not watching the games if he's not an all defensive player, because if you talk to the coaches, he's the one keeping them up at night, you know. And he does it in a way that's so consistent and not flamboyant. And, you know, I want him to feel recognized for that, because we're going to need him to continue to be that guy. And it's like anything else. If you're chopping wood all day and you don't get any type of pat on the back, we got to keep him going on that, because our team is drastically different without his defense. We're not a top 10 defense. We're not a top 10 offense. He's not going to be the reason we're a top 10 defense, but he's the reason why we're even hovering around it. We're going to need the rest of the team to drag us into the top 10. I think he's carrying more than enough. But if you just watch him night to night, or you have to game plan for him, now I can understand if you're watching a million games and you're just it's hard to watch. But he's a guy that you have to prepare for, every single game when you play us. And I know enough coaches in the league, and they all have a couple of same things they always say to us about. They always say the same thing, and one of them is his name, always, And I just like the way he goes about it too. There's no pretense to him. He's not complaining all the time. We say we don't want the guys complaining. Well, he's not complaining, but he's also not getting the recognition. But he's a true competitor, man. That guy's he's a true competitor. I know Mark uses all different types of phrases to I forget what they are, but he's Like, he's a tough guy.
Your top pick in these last few drafts has kind of had sporadic odds, but this year you have, I think, an 85% chance of landing at 12. Does that change your approach at all?
No, because I, as I've said the last 2 years, like, this is so random. You know, the year that we moved back, I did my media beforehand, because if we happened to move back and then I came back and said, don't worry, we're right where we want to be, no one would have believed me, right? So I think you have to have humility in the face of volatility and randomness, and you have to accept it for what it is. Maybe we'll get extraordinarily lucky. The odds are very, very sharply against that. I wouldn't plan on it. But certainly when we moved, when we ended up where we were last year, we certainly weren't taking any victory laps because we had nothing to do with that. I think you just have to always recognize how little you really control we really have over a lot of things. And so one of the things that I was talking to someone that called me recently about for some advice on something, and I basically said, like, the job is you have to be able to deal with aftermath. Get good at that. Recognize what that is, because that's essentially what you're working with, is aftermath. The aftermath of whatever it is that takes place, you have to come in and you have to organize, inspire, strategize, and ultimately lead out of that. And that can be good or bad. There's aftermath to success too, because people start to forget that maybe not everything was their doing, right? So you got to deal with aftermath, whatever it is that comes our way. But we'll deal with whatever the outcomes are, and then we'll just go to work and do what we always do and try to make the best decisions.
Last couple of years, the team has been the youngest team, and they've had to learn and grow on the fly. But Mark is also a young coach that had to learn and grow on the fly. Is there a specific area of growth that you've seen in his coaching style, or just him period?
I mean, probably a lot. The hard thing for me with that one, Daniel, is I've known Mark so long. I remember him, I just have you remember the beginnings of your relationships, you know what I mean? So it's a long time ago. I've watched him develop so much. But the best thing about him, or not the best thing, one of the best things is I think he has awareness of the things he wants to continue to improve at. I think that's what makes him good. It's what's matriculated him from where he started to where he is. I think it will continue to help him. The reps of just being in these situations, games, decisions, plans, things like that, it's just really, really helpful. Because, he's just gathering more and more of these experiences and I think turning them into wisdom in a lot of ways. So I don't have one specific thing, but I think he realizes that I think he's good at understanding the sequence of building out a team, that it takes a lot of time, and that sometimes if you just reach for the closest lever, you're shutting off all your opportunity. And so being willing to kind of wait and watch that, and even if it's failing, okay, what are we learning from that? And not overreacting. Could have done that the first, as I said, I think we were only 2 months over 500. So there's majority of the season we were under 500. Month-wise, obviously. There could have been a million different ways to try to shortcut that or not be as flexible at learning more. But we would have probably not ended up where we ended up. And so I understand sometimes people can't understand that way of thinking, and they just don't follow the bouncing ball to that point. That's not something I'm really that concerned about. You know what I mean? The perception of what we do or how we do it says more about the individual than it does about us, because everyone's perceiving it through their own history, psychology, or whatever. we're just trying to we've been very open about what we're trying to do and why. And that doesn't mean it's right, but it's not. I don't think it's just, if you can't understand it, I think it's more because of the way you think than it is about what we think.